Now, what is interesting here is most parents are now preferring or would rather have girls instead of boys. Now, this reverses the historical trend. Traditionally, families would rather have a boy, carry on the family name, the legacy, but now that is changing. In Japan, 70% of parents who can only have one child would prefer a girl. Data from some fertility doctors in the US suggest as much as 80% of US families, if they could choose between a boy or a girl, would choose a girl. And the question I think we have to ask here is why? Is it, and I would say it's probably because boys and men have been so demonized, they have actually become second-class citizens. If I think who's going to have an easier ride through school, through university, through their early career, probably a girl. I think it's actually much harder to be a boy these days. So I can understand some of the anxiety parents would have if, they find out they're having a boy. In the 21st century, that's hard.
Well, because interesting, this is from two psychologists writing in the Oz today, Rachel Sampson and Phil Bird, and they've described this, quote, gender disappointment as like something that people are presenting to clinicians with, and they're saying they are filled with dread and anxiety and worry about the possibility of having to raise a boy, which seems crazy because it's like, you're having a child. It's like one of the greatest miracles on earth, right? And you're like, oh, my God, it's not the gender I expected. This is going to be difficult. Parenthood is sometimes difficult, of course. But I think it's become fashionable now to have a girl, and girls have become fashionable. And look, there had to be some level of correction because, of course, we've seen what happens when you put too much weight on having a boy, vis-a-vis China, when they had the one-child policy, for economic purposes.
Ancient Greece, they just left the girls on the side of the mountain.
But, like for economic purposes, there was sex-selective abortion. Women would have girls and just chuck them away. Like, they didn't want to have girls because if you can only have one baby, they want the boy because he's going to bring home the bacon. Yep. It's better for the family. And historically, that has been the case. So a correction of that phenomenon is not necessarily a bad thing. But the pendulum has now swung too far and we've gone to the other side and it's now so fashionable to have a girl that everyone wants a girl instead. What about the poor boys?
Well, here's a couple of interesting things. Firstly, if you actually have proper equality, which I think we pretty much do now, you don't need to have a correction at all because, of course, the girl can go and become just as much of a breadwinner as the male can, and someone will write and say, actually, there's a difference in the pay scale, but it'll be all right.
But it's not as fashionable.
But it's not as fashionable, and there are a few Facebook feminists who have sort of talked about their disappointment, getting pregnant and finding out it's a boy and thinking, oh no, I wanted to raise a little, another. Haven't you heard? You haven't heard this? Freya's pulling a face.
Yeah,
but yeah, no.
How can you say that about your own child?
Someone wrote it was a few years ago, but someone wrote a sort of piece in probably The Guardian or somewhere saying how I came to terms with the fact that I had a straight boy as a child, but they probably hadn't guessed his sexuality, or maybe he was transitioning later on. But
I reckon Clementine Ford wrote something like that.
Well, it does sound rather Fordish. But the interesting thing is, if it is being done for sort of ideological reasons, because girls do much better at school and they develop much quicker and get much smarter, and probably just are much smarter. So, there might be that. But if it's being done for those sort of ideological reasons, the obvious repercussion of having more women than men, much more women than men, there's already a bit more women than men, is that you will increase the population because you increase your capacity to reproduce. So, obviously, a guy can't actually, unless, unless...
So we males have to increase polygamy rates to make that happen.
It doesn't matter. The problem is not the lack of... The problem is the lack of carriers.
So it's actually good for the blokes, is what you're saying?
No, well...
We've got more birds.
It's good for the blokes because you get more birds, but... it will increase the global population, and this is usually from the left who are saying we need to decrease the global population because climate change and we're eating up too many of the planet's resources. But the handbrake on that is a limit to how much you actually can. But I guess, Matt, all the women that they choose to have will choose not to have kids because...
Yeah, well, it's true. I'll have to go and
they might be a boy.
Set up my harem now, I suppose.